Hey, how's it going? So, I'm gonna be honest, I think I owe an explanation to you all for the lack of activity these months. So, remember how I told you I was going to do something between November and December? Yeah, well, as you can probably notice, that actually never happened. Well, not that I didn't work on anything, it was more like a change of plans happened. Being honest with you, I did take like 2 weeks off from doing anything programming related once vacation started for me. I had a really bad end of semester experience. Well, no, not bad. Bad is just about the average. Saying I had a horrible end of semester experience would be more fitting. I'm not going to explain everything that happened. Instead, I'm just going to tell you that my last semester just reminded me how much I hate working in teams. Anyways, I don't want to think about it anymore, so let's just get back to the actual video. So the 2 weeks went by, and then I started my next project. What I had in mind was doing like a hide and seek game in 2D that you could play with friends. But as soon as I started working on that, a lot of problems started to appear. So I knew already that I would need to set up a server somewhere in order to be able to have multiplayer. But dude, I started to investigate more about what I needed to do, and I could barely understand anything. And the fact that I barely survived my networking classes wasn't helping at all. So I thought maybe I would just stick with a local network playing system, but I honestly didn't like that idea at all, since the point of the game is to be able to play in different locations. Or, well, at least that was the idea. So, okay, I thought, you know what, doesn't matter doing a local network since you're just practicing and you want to be able to do a video about it. But the more I got to work on it, the more I actually hated the project. I realized that I was doing a video game just for the sake of making anything and then making a video about it. It wasn't something, or well, it wasn't a video game concept that I was actually excited for. I also thought that every project that I've done so far was just for practice. And yes, I know that I've only shown one in the channel, but I've done several others behind the scenes. But if all of that is for practice, then at what point am I actually going to make something official? I don't want to wait until I have a big audience to do something. I need to start doing something now. I want to start doing something now for the sake of doing something that I like, not for the sake of making a video about it. So, after thinking about it for a while, I've decided that I'm going to officially start making my first game and actually publish it. I don't plan to do anything super big because, again, this is the first time I'm doing it and there are a lot of things that I need to figure out. But hey, that's how you learn, right? By doing. Okay, so let's start really talking about the video game. So here are some basic points for the game itself. The first one is that it's gonna be short, nothing super big. I don't plan to do anything that takes longer than an hour to complete. So what I'm aiming for here is something like Samurai's 2, and that game isn't very long, it doesn't take you more than an hour to complete it. So that's kind of what I want to go for. The second point is that it's going to be a puzzle game. Again, not super complicated mechanics because it's the first time that I'm doing this, and I don't want to overcomplicate things, and just not take a lot of big risks for starting, basically. Okay, the third point here is that it's going to be a single player game. Listen, I'm a pretty dumb person, alright? I don't understand a lot about networking. So if I wanted to do something that is multiplayer, I think the most appropriate thing for me it would be to hire someone to handle that. And I don't have the money for that. And yeah, let's just stick with single player since it's better for me. And I just really love single player games. It's most of what I play anyways. The next point is that I want the game to be able to tell a story, because, you know, I don't want you to be solving puzzles just for the sake of solving puzzles, basically. I want the puzzles and the game to be able to tell a story that the player actually enjoys. And finally, the game has to feel that it's handmade. And with this, I mean, like, look, some of my favorite games are, for example, Goodies and Machinarium. And once you get to see the sprites of the game, you know that the game was made with a lot of passion, with a lot of patience, you know? And I kind of want that to be the feel for my game. So that's a very important point, and I need to keep that in mind, alright? With that being said, what is the game actually going to be about? I think a good game is something that connects with the audience, so the first idea that came to mind was dogs, actually. I like dogs, a lot of people like dogs, so I thought it was a good option. So yeah, our main character is a dog. Not going to talk much about the story since I would be spoiling it. And, you know, while not something super complicated and long, I still want the players to discover the story for themselves when they play the game. So yeah, I'm not gonna talk about the story itself a lot. Okay, so everything that I mentioned up until now was like kind of my thought process for, you know, developing the game idea. And this is what I would call the planning phase of the game. And once I was done with it, it was already like the beginning of January, if I remember correctly. So I thought that at that point it was a good opportunity to start to actually working on the game itself. I want to add a note here. I'm pretty dumb, okay? So most of the time you will see me doing just what feels right rather than following methodology. Listen, I repeat, this is the first time that I'm doing something to actually release to the public. So I will do things that maybe will make no sense to someone with more experience than me, but at the end of the day, this is what worked for me and helped me to actually get something done. Alright, so let's just keep that in mind. The first thing that I made was our main character sprites. As you can see here, there were a lot of ideas on how it would look like, and at the end I decided to stick more with this design over here, since I thought it would just be easier to animate and handle within the engine. So then, with that in mind, I made the actual final version of how I wanted the dog to look like, and separated it in order to scan it and put it in the engine. When I say this is the final version, I don't mean that it is not possible for it to change in the future. I just mean that I was happy with how it turned out, and it wouldn't bother me if it is indeed the final version that is present when the game releases. Okay, after this I arranged each of the body parts correctly in Godot and did two animations, idle and running. These are just the basic animations that I will probably be present throughout the whole game, and I will get to do the more complicated and occasional animations once I need to actually implement it. I spent a couple hours here, researching and watching a lot of examples of how dogs actually walk, and while the game is not very realistic, I wanted to have an idea of how they actually move, since I would probably just make a whole mess without a reference. So at this point, I think the character was in a pretty good state to actually start working on the actual levels and mechanics. I know that as a developer, I shouldn't concentrate too much on perfection in the sprites right now, since what's more important for me is like to have the skeleton of the game in order to see if the game actually works by itself and works as intended. But I also feel like I need a clear idea of how I want the game to look like. And so I did a bunch of, I don't know, what do you want to call them? Mock-ups? Concept art, I guess? Anyways, whatever you want to call them, of the first area of the game. I really want the game to feel handmade, so I just want to mention and emphasize that everything that you will see here on screen and in future updates was actually done by me on paper and by my team as well, with different techniques, alright? So the first version was done with watercolor, and as you can probably see, it didn't work out very well. I don't know, dude, I think it looks dirty, very messy, and when I put it in the engine, it looks even worse. So yeah, watercolors weren't doing it for me. So the next version I did was with oil pastels. And again, it wasn't something that I actually liked. It looked messy, it looked bad, so again, I did another version, this time with acrylics, and I actually liked how this one turned out. It didn't look as messy, and the colors looked way better in the engine. Okay, so acrylics were the answer, right? But I still didn't feel 100% satisfied with this version, especially when I asked my friends about it. A bunch of them told me that some of the colors were kind of off and that it didn't look a lot like a desert, which was what I wanted it to look like. So, not a desert like the ones in Egypt, more like a desert that you sometimes can see in movies in the highway. I don't really know if desert is the correct term for this, but I don't know what else to call it, so I'm just gonna call it desert, alright? And you know, they were valid points, I could see the reasoning behind them, and they also made another bunch of annotations. So, the plants in the front looked more like bushes instead of the plants that I wanted them to look like, and the mountains in the back didn't look like the mountains that I was going for. Additionally, I also made some suggestions for the next version. Okay, so the outlines that I drew just look really bad, let's be honest. Also, the mountains have way too much detail for something that is supposed to be in the background anyways. I don't know, I feel like they kind of mix somehow with the floor and draw too much attention, which isn't something good since the main focus point of the player should be in the floor where the character moves, which is a yellow one. Same thing with the clouds, maybe too much detail. So with that in consideration, and after 2 days struggling with color theory, I made again another version of the environment, and this is how it looked like. See? It looks way better, and I was really happy with this one. Naturally, this is the concept that I'm sticking with for the moment, and, you know, at least for the first act of the game. So, once this was finally done, and I actually knew what I wanted the game to look like, I started actually working in the fun part. So, actually started making the game in the engine, basically. For the sake of not making this video very long, I thought I should just make the first section of the game with temporary assets for now. Hence why you see everything in black and white. And I thought I should also implement the necessary parallax layers and add movement to the player to see how everything looked together. And this is how it looked like in the end. I think it looks pretty good. Actually, I'm pretty happy with it. Oh, and don't worry if something looks kind of off or weird right now. These are just temporary assets, and I will add the actual assets once I finish each act of the game. Okay, yeah, I know it's not a lot, at least for now, but look, now that I know what I want the game to look like, I can concentrate in the mechanics in the future updates, and just add the color assets once I finish each act of the game. I think it's good that I have a solid idea of what I want the game to be, and now I just need to actually implement it rather than working without having a clear idea of what I want, and changing everything as I go. So yeah, I will start working immediately in the game puzzles and other mechanics, and also probably adding UI elements such as a menu and options and the settings and so on. So expect a future video about those. But this is it for now. Some things I need to consider for the future are, well, the sounds and the game soundtrack itself, since I'm no sound engineer, right? But that will be for another video. Anyways, I hope you liked the video, and hope even more that you like how the game is looking right now. If you did like it, please like the video and subscribe, since it helps a lot as motivation to keep working in the project. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you're alright, stay safe out there, and I'll see you around. Bye bye.